We've been talking to every CEO in the United States about what's going on back home and the government shutdown. Interestingly enough, there are now a number of federal workers who are trying to make ends meet being Uber drivers.
Yes, we love it when new driver partners join the platform, but this is most definitely not how we want new driver partners to join the platform.
How many have you seen join?
We haven't quantified it, but it's definitely happening in D.C., and it's happening to the most needy. And listen, we're hoping that this ends. Obviously, it's out of our control, but one of the benefits of Uber is that for people who are displaced temporarily, if they lose a job, if something happens and they need some earnings opportunities, Uber is there. And then when they don't need Uber, they can kind of move on as well.
What's the upfront cost for a driver just to jump in? Because there are...
You've got to own a car. Right. You've got to have a license. You have to do a background check, although we cover that cost for you. So the cost is really de minimis. You just have to have, make sure that you don't have a criminal past that would cause an issue in the platform.
One of the other issues related to the government shutdown has been the delay in IPOs and the fact that the 5,000 workers at the SEC have now become 250 workers at the SEC, and their pens have completely stopped working effectively. Yeah. What does that mean for the IPO that you have talked now so much about being a 2019 proposition?
Well, I've been told that I've talked too much about the IPO, so I won't specifically talk about the IPO. But listen, I always tell my team, focus on what you can control. And there's nothing that we can do about the shutdown. There's nothing we can do about the SEC. What we can do is run a good business, build a terrific service, continue to build our brand, and that's really what we're focused on right now.
And in terms of growth right now and profitability, how much are you focused on the growth piece versus the profitability piece ahead of the IPO? And has that shift changed?
Well, what we want to build is sustainable growth that can be profitable. Sometimes near term, for example, if you look at one of our largest and fastest growing businesses, Uber Eats. Home delivery of food, it's over 200,000 restaurants in under 30 minutes. It's a magical experience. And we have had cities in which the Eats product has become profitable. But essentially, once we saw that program working, we're accelerating city launches. Early cities early on are unprofitable, but we know that the model is sustainably profitable over a long period of time. So we think about near-term growth with long-term profits.
Hey, Dara, you just said that your message to your team is don't worry about the stuff we can't control, focus on what we can. So what's at the list of your worries of things that you can control, things that you'd like to really get your arms around?
Well, I think that one area that we can control is making sure that our growth is now in concert with regulators of cities in which we operate. I think that in the past, and listen, to some extent it was a strength, but it's not something that is sustainable. We grew just purely based on consumer demand, and we didn't necessarily take the time to have a dialogue with society, with regulators, with cities as to growth that serves all of the constituencies. We're having that dialogue now. It sometimes causes complexity in our model, sometimes causes us to pause, but it creates a lasting model. And what's special about Uber is we're part of life in the cities. We're a huge labor force, et cetera. So we've got to take that time and have that dialogue.
You know, it wasn't just that you weren't taking the time before you were there as CEO. I think the company's actual plan was to kind of sneak in under the radar and do as much as you could as quickly as possible. Are you still dealing with the after effects of like bruised egos, bruised feelings in some of these municipalities?
I think in some, but I would tell you that the majority of municipalities, their goal is to improve life for their citizens, with the folks who live in their cities. And life with Uber Eats, life with Jump Bikes, et cetera, is better. And it's a question of how we can achieve our goals, but be respectful of some of the limits that they put on us.
Talking about growth, but also talking about profitability, one of the issues that we talked so much about was autonomous vehicles, the role that Uber planned or expected to play in that, and now what appears to be a little bit of a retreat in that world.
Yeah, I think we certainly took a retreat based on the accident that happened that last year, and we took that opportunity to really rebuild how we build product. But I do think that autonomous is an enormous technology. It will bring huge strides in safety, huge strides in making transportation available to more people around the world. anytime you have a technology that is as earth-shaking as autonomous, it doesn't come easy.
But do you think that you need to be at the forefront of building and creating and inventing that technology and investing in that up front? Or do you think, or have you shifted your thought in terms of letting the Waymos of the world and others take that innovation risk, if you will, and then maybe later on either partnering with them and bringing them into your portfolio?
Listen, if there's one thing that Uber is about, it's about innovation risk. I don't think it's a have to. It's we want to be at the forefront. And I think we want to be at the forefront because we think that building out autonomous technology in a live network, we don't need to build it for every single circumstance. We don't need to build it for bad weather. We don't need to build it for if there are accidents, et cetera. We can build autonomous and launch it for situations, simple situations, one step at a time.
How has the timeline changed, you think?
I
People used to say
think that-
2020, realistically, we'd all be jumping in these cars regularly. People were talking about that. By the way, I think you might have been talking about that, too.
I think that the timeline, it has proven to be more difficult than we thought.
Because of technology or because of regulation?
Yes. Both.
Yes to both.
Yeah, and I think that regulation is going to be play a big part in that introduction. I do think that because we run a live network, the problem that we're solving for us is going to be simpler than anyone else's. And by the way, we are completely opening to partnering with third-party autonomous because ultimately we believe in the technology. We want to own a part of it. It's a great opportunity, but ultimately we think this will be good for society.
Just coming back to the IPO issue, and I know you don't want to speak to too much of it, and it may be one of those issues that you might argue is out of your hands or out of the control,
sure.
and you focus on the stuff you can. But your main competitor also wants to go public.
So we've heard.
So you've heard.
I guess they announced.
I'm sure you've given some thought to this. Does it matter who goes first in terms of setting a floor for the valuation, in terms of how the public and the investment community thinks about these type of companies?
Floor or ceiling?
Floor or ceiling?
Well, if I tend not to worry about those issues. It's listen, whoever comes first comes first.
But do you feel a race?
No. I mean, listen, the race is in innovating and building a service. From my standpoint, there's no race going public. If we do it, when we do it, we will do it when it's the right time for the company. This is a big enough service. This is a big enough brand where I think that there will be a market for us anytime we go public when the time is right.
I love it. You're mainstream, just so you know. I know you don't need to hear that, but
Is mainstream good or bad?
It means
when it
he's an
hits me, it's
He's now using Uber.
He's now
constantly.
Uber. Yeah, and
mainstream
you.
or
Just for
jumping
my-
the shark, one of the two.
Okay,
just for my
thank you.
kids, it's a huge load off of my mind a lot of times. So whether they're at a party at night or you know the college one, the high school one, it's a huge load off.
And this is how it changes lives. So
It does.
we want you to be relaxed and happy, Joe. That's
I don't like when they cancel. I really.
We don't like it either.
I want to find the person who cancels and like hurt them. But no.
I have two related questions, and one is about safety. You made a decision. It was really an interesting moral decision. Relates to growth, relates to purpose, and all of this. Where effectively you slowed down your growth and I believe your profitability to invest on the safety side in terms of drivers.
Yes.
Sort of walk us through that thinking a little bit.
So I think that.
And what was happening that really led to that?
What was happening was that my team and the operating team, the folks on the ground in Mexico, in Brazil, in the U.S., et cetera, they all came to me and said, listen, with the numbers getting this big, with our platform getting as large, we have to take responsibility for the platform. So I've got to give credit to my operators. This wasn't like the CEO, the moral CEO coming down. The team said, with a platform this big, and when you've got people's lives in your hands, this isn't about privacy. These are people's lives. We've got to invest here in safety, even if it causes short-term pain and growth. And we came together as a team, and we're building technology. We're making sure that the background checks, et cetera, all of that is being done. We have a 911 button just in case something happens. So there's a whole host of activity going into safety, and it came from the team.
And then final question, do we have time? I think we have two. I'm going to just go very quickly. Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
You obviously didn't go to Saudi. They're a huge investor. Has your view changed about whether you want to do business with certain countries, including Saudi Arabia?
We want to be in as many countries as we can because ultimately we think that our service is good for society. It provides lots of job opportunities for drivers out there. We hesitate to make kind of judgments based on, oh, this government's good, this government's bad. We want to be on the ground on a force for good, and usually I think if we're a force for good, then we can move forward societies in a positive manner.